This is Etsy Storage Art Store, Video 1. Hi, here's your Storage Art Store installation instructions. We'll first look at the inside of a typical interior wall. Now, some walls contain the short horizontal 2x4s you're looking at called blocking or fire blocks, which keep the wall studs from curling to one side or the other during construction, and also help keep a fire from spreading through a house by cutting off its oxygen supply. Now, if the normal height is 48 inches from the floor, so you might as well play it safe and mount your cabinet above 48 inches and avoid this blocking. And it's also a good idea to mount your cabinet out of the reach of small children. You've seen now that the center of the studs is a standard 16 inches apart. Now, since a 2x4 is 1.5 inches thick, the width of the opening of the stud pocket, or stud bay as it's called, is 14.5 inches wide. And since a 2x4 is 3.5 inches wide, these stud pockets provide an amazing amount of wasted space behind your walls, some of which we're about to take advantage of. This is what is called a stud finder. Approximately $10, this battery-operated tool will light up as you slide it along your wall surface and show you the location of the studs behind your wall. Now, it's also possible to knock on your wall with your knuckles and hear the location of the studs. The wooden stud makes a solid sound as opposed to the hollow sound when knocking on the area between the studs. Again, though, we're playing it safe in this situation and using the stud finder. It's inexpensive, $10 or so. I've placed masking tape on the approximate top and bottom of where I want the opening, but remember that the larger frame of the cabinet will extend almost 2 inches above, below, and on each side of the opening that you'll be making. So we'll place the stud finder on the wall, push the button, and slowly slide until the red light points at the edge of the stud. Now what we'll do is double check by sliding from the other side. The marks should be about 1.5 inches apart, if that is the stud. We'll now do the same for the other side of the opening, again marking only the inside edge of the stud, but again double checking with the stud finder for the outside edge, which should be 1.5 inches over. Now, don't worry if you accidentally mark the outside edge. Again, remember that the frame will cover almost 2 inches on all sides. So we now have a good indication of the location of the studs. But we'll now repeat the last two steps in the lower area of where the opening will be to both double check the location of the studs and also give us 2 more marks to help us place the template, which will correctly help us trace out the opening location. These extra marks help us visualize exactly where the studs are located. Again, though, remember before this next step that the frame extends almost 2 inches above, below, and on both sides of the hole that you'll soon be cutting. Now, using the marks we've made on the wall, we'll place the template on the wall, which is primarily for marking the top and bottom of the upcoming opening that we'll be cutting in the wall. Now, I'm sorry to be blocking the view with my shoulder and back, but we're marking the corners, again, mainly for the top and bottom horizontal cuts, left to right cuts. This also shows us the top and bottom of the first cut that we'll make, which will be a vertical cut along one of the studs. Now, the saw that we'll use will cut the drywall pretty easily without cutting the stud, so we'll actually be using the stud as a guide on our first cut. Okay, this is what is called a drywall saw. It costs about $5 or $6 at the Big Orange hardware store, and I've got the details on that and the stud finder if you click See More on the bottom of this video above the comments. I'll also put those details at the end of this video if you want to pause on that part, get the numbers on that. Okay, let's get to it. And I know I'm blocking your view with my shoulder again, and you'll see this better on some of the other cuts, but we tap the blade of the saw into the drywall with the palm of our hand and then start sawing the drywall using the stud itself as our guide. We want to cut right up against the stud, almost like we're trying to cut the stud. Of course, this saw can't really cut the stud, but it will cut right through that drywall, or sheetrock as it's called by a lot of people, I guess depending on which part of the country that you live. Now, because this first cut is the most important, and even though I didn't show it in the video, you might want to repeat the same cut the second time. If you went from the top to the bottom, you might want to go from the bottom to the top, because you definitely want to make sure that this cut is right up against that stud. Now, the reason that we want to make this cut right up against the stud is that it now gives us a plumb line, so that we can use the template again to mark the upper and lower horizontal cuts, the left to right cuts. Now, plumb, in case you don't know the term, it's about the same as level, but level is horizontal, plumb is vertical. So plumb is level from top to bottom, in other words. So if we place the template against this straight, plumb first cut that we made, and I know I'm blocking the video with my shoulder again, we can now mark our upper and lower horizontal cuts, the left to right cuts, knowing that they'll be level. But again, remember, even if these cuts aren't perfect, it doesn't matter. You can cut the ugliest hole in the world, it'll still be covered by almost 2 inches of frame all the way around. We'll watch now how easy it is to finish making these cuts. I'll make a few comments too. It would have been easier to use a step stool instead of reaching so high to use the saw. Just be careful if you use a step stool. You don't want to fall off. Also, don't forget to put some paper on your floor because the drywall dust will fall down. And if you don't leave your shop fan on like I did to cool off, the powder will fall straight down, and it is easier to clean up like that. It doesn't hurt anything, just makes me look like I have a bad case of dandruff in this case. Okay, it's time for the last cut now. Make sure you're right up against the stud. This panel will fall out at the end, so try to catch it. Try not to damage it, because in a worst-case scenario, say, for example, we find a plastic vent pipe in the wall inside of this opening, we can actually replace this cut panel, and with drywall tape and drywall mud, make it look like this opening never happened. That video's next. We'll call that one Storage Art WCS, which stands for Worst Case Scenario. But again, this can be avoided by looking for vent pipes on your roof for an approximate location, and in the unlikely case it looks like it's right where you want to install your cabinet, go up in your attic and check it out. Make sure there's nothing protruding into that pocket. Okay, once we get that panel off, if there's any insulation inside of the wall, you will have to get it out of the way. You can either cut it with a utility knife or any kind of sharp knife and remove it. That's the easiest thing. Or you can just stuff it either up or down into the wall. You have to tear it with your hands, or it'd be a nice thing to wear gloves for this. But the main thing you're doing here is getting it out of the way. And in this case, I'm removing it. If there's anything else in the way, protruding from the other side of the wall, you will have to remove that too. If you followed my directions, you checked for something on the other side of the wall. It's important that you check the warnings in the instructions and do that before you make that cut in the wall, because if it's something that can't be moved, then you will have to replace that panel. The next thing we'll do is check both sides and make sure that the drywall is trimmed even with the stud on both sides, so that we will have that 14.5-inch opening that we will require. Now, the top and bottom cuts don't have to be pretty. Remember, the frame itself covers almost 2 inches all the way around. So even if it's not the most beautiful hole you've ever seen, it doesn't matter. The frame itself will cover any imperfections and make everything look beautiful. And since you were smart enough to put some newspaper on the floor, it'd be a good time to wipe around the opening with a clean, dry cloth just to Now we're looking at the drywall shims that will attach to your cabinet with Velcro and hold the cabinet in place in your wall. And we made it easy. The Velcro is already attached, and we included 8 shims total, 4 thin ones and 4 thicker ones. The first thing you'll do is try with the 4 thinnest shims, which are already attached. If the cabinet doesn't fit snugly in the opening, try removing the thin shims from one side. They just peel right off thanks to the Velcro, and replacing them with 2 of the thicker shims. Always place the thinnest side of the shim towards the back of the cabinet so that it enters the opening first. And this whole process is pretty much trial and error until you come up with the combination that allows the cabinet to fit snugly inside of the opening. In this particular installation, for example, I used the 2 thin shims on one side and the 2 thicker ones on the other for a perfect fit. You see that with the right combination, the cabinet slides right into place. Now, you want it to fit tight, but you don't want to use excessive force. Now, some of you handy types might decide to screw the cabinet to the wall. That's why we've enclosed a small container of touch-up paint to cover the screws, or spackling if you use a countersunk screw. Another installation option would be to use an epoxy putty to secure the back of the large cabinet frame to the wall itself. 4 balls of putty would hold it to the wall. This would make it difficult to remove if that's ever necessary. But remember that you can always easily remove your painting if you're moving out of the house, for example, and replace it with an inexpensive print. But we do thank you for watching. Read the directions. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us through our Etsy Storage Art store, and we'll be happy to help.